is LBC. From Global, leading Britain's conversation, The Nigel Farage Show.
Mr. Nigel Farage.
Thank you, Donald, and good evening, everybody. Well, it's that man, Boris, again. He's never very far away from the news headlines, is he? An article he wrote yesterday in the Daily Telegraph is causing outrage. The irony is, the piece he wrote was suggesting that Denmark banning the burka actually was taking things a little bit too far, that it wasn't really up to states to go as far as to dictate as to what people could and could not wear. But his personal view on the burqa was that women that wear it choose to go around looking like letterboxes or even bank robbers. So it's funny, isn't it? On the one hand, it's a very liberal article saying we shouldn't outright ban the burqa, but on the other, he is being pretty condemnatory of the practice. I have to say, it all rings great bells from me, because back in 2010, I said I did not think that burqa should be worn in public spaces such as banks, the underground. I mean, can you imagine if I sat on the Circle Line wearing a balaclava? I mean, there'd be alarm bells ringing everywhere. I'd be told to remove it. So, I'm used to huge furore and arguments over the burqa. But what was Boris doing here? I mean, was he, despite the fact he was trying to make a so-called liberal immigration argument? And don't forget, this is the man who has supported amnesties for illegal immigrants in London. But was he actually, in a sense, by saying that if you wear a burqa, you look like a letterbox, was he just giving a free opinion as to how he felt about it? Or was this a somewhat more naked bid for the leadership of the Tory party? Because I tell you what, you look at the national polling over the last couple of years, and whilst the polls vary, consistently over half the country as a whole supports a public burqa ban. And don't forget, this has been done in Belgium, it's been done in France, it's being done increasingly around European countries, Denmark being the latest to join this trend. But I wonder if you drilled it down to Conservative voters, it's probably nearer 65%. Who actually want this. Now, Boris, of course, has resigned over the Chequers Accord. We all know he wants to become Prime Minister. You can say it's Boris making an off-the-cuff, witty comment. You can say it's naked opportunism. Take your pick. But I want to ask you, in the light of these comments, does Boris still have the potential of being a future Tory leader? And if you think no, his comments are beyond the pale, he can never lead the party, call me on 0345 6060 973. If you think, do you know what? It makes a change, doesn't it? To at least have somebody that stands up and says it as it is, and he'd be great to be leader and Prime Minister, then text to 84850. I'm also very keen to hear, if you're from the Muslim community, do you find Boris's comments offensive, or is he actually on the money? I mean, after all, as I understand it, the Quran does not demand that women cover up their faces. If that's how you feel, tweet using the hashtag Farage and LBC at LBC, and of course watch us on Facebook and comment there too. Now, he's coming under attack, of course, not just from the Labour Party, but from his own party. Minister of State for the Middle East, Alistair Burt, was on the BBC this morning. This is what he said.
I would never have made such a comment. I think there is a degree of offence in that, absolutely right. What he was trying to make a serious point about is the United Kingdom government will not enforce any clothing restriction on anyone. I wish he hadn't accompanied it with a comment that I certainly wouldn't make, and I think many people would find offensive, yes.
So there you go, Alistair Burt, who is clearly a much higher level of human being than Boris Johnson, saying he would not have done this. That, of course, was followed up by Brandon Lewis, the party chairman, demanding that Boris make an apology. And tonight, within the last half an hour, Prime Minister Theresa May has backed calls for Boris to apologise for his comments about Muslim women who wear burqas, remarks which she said clearly caused offence. And there's now a string of Tory MPs condemning Boris. Interestingly, almost every single one of them are Remain supporters. Now, you can draw whatever conclusions you wish from that. It's a pretty... I mean, look, Boris isn't stupid. This wasn't an off-the-cuff comment after a glass of wine. This was an article that he sat down and wrote for the Daily Telegraph. Boris is many things, but he is not stupid. He knew what the reaction to this was going to be. Does this mean that he's any longer suitable to be Tory party leader? I have to tell you, folks, I think that given that the Conservative Party leader is chosen from amongst paid-up Tory party members, in my view, having made these comments, makes him more likely to become Tory party leader and not less, because people are pretty sick to death of a very politically correct Prime Minister who never, ever speaks out of turn on any single subject. Let me know what you think. Does Boris still, after these comments, have that potential? Let's go to Anthony in Staines and ask him. Anthony, good evening.
Good evening, Nigel.
So is Boris fit? Is he cut out to be the Prime Minister, and do these comments help him?
Well, he's certainly not fit, because he's carrying a little weight, shall we say.
Isn't it funny? Here's a guy that's always photographed jogging or riding a bike, and he is carrying a few pounds, isn't he?
Indeed. Well, so am I, so I can't really...
so am I.
But as far as being fit for purpose for PM, certainly not. He's drinking the last chance saloon as far as the Tory leadership is concerned. He appealed to the Blue Rinse Brigade. That's what he's doing here. But he has made too many gaffes, really, to be a serious candidate. Right back, the Scousers, I had to apologise for that. It's fun, we enjoy it. But if someone is putting themselves forward in this world we live in as a candidate for PM, David Cameron certainly couldn't have got away with this. John Major couldn't. Even Maggie Thatcher couldn't. You can't say things like this in this sort of society we live in.
Anthony, I'm going to pull you up for a second there and say...
Yes.
And say go 3,000 miles to the west, where there is a gentleman who also carries a few pounds more than perhaps he should, equally has an unusual blonde hairstyle. His name is Donald J. Trump, and he consistently says things that are considered to be outrageous, beyond the pale, ill-considered, offensive, and his approval ratings are now the highest of any leader in the Western world.
But there's only one Trump. I mean, I do follow him. I watch his programme. I know how he operates. He rubs people out the wrong way. That is Trump. There's only one Trump. There'll only be one Trump. And yes, I do admire the way he works, and he upsets people. He does it on The Apprentice. He does it in politics. That's him, but there's only one Trump.
So are you saying that Boris is not the equal of Trump?
No, he's a tin-pot Trump. He's a pound shop Trump.
Dear. You're really having a go here, Anthony, aren't you? Have you always disliked Boris?
No, I don't dislike him. In fact, I've always advocated he should be in government. When May came in, I always said he should be in there, and I think he should be in there now, because I think he's twiddling around on the sidelines there, writing these silly things. He should be back there in government, following through this project, following through Brexit, and deliver that money for the NHS. That's what he is. He's listening. Get in there, Boris, and get back in government.
And Anthony, if you are walking down Staines High Street with your shopping bag, and you see a couple of women walking up to you wearing the burka, what do you think?
Well, we don't see that. I don't think we see them in this country. I don't live in parts of London. It doesn't really scare me. It doesn't alarm me. It can be a little intimidating. People aren't used to it. But we do have a very high Muslim population here now, and the headdress doesn't bother me. In fact, I think it's a rather good idea in this weather. In fact, I wish a lot of men would wear the burqa.
No, come on. No, Anthony, really, you're not being serious here. Do you understand why over half the population... I mean, my comments back in 2010 on this were not as incendiary as Boris's, but I said a lot of people feel very uncomfortable when they see women, who've got their entire faces and bodies covered up. I don't think I was wrong in saying that. Do you understand why, Anthony, over half the population want this practice banned?
Oh, yes, indeed, I do. But because I've studied Islam, I've studied Arabic, I understand the culture. My family is not Arabic, but from sort of south of Spain. And so, that Moorish culture, I quite like that Moorish, that culture, the Islamic culture. I don't identify...
But wearing the burqa is actually a relatively new thing, isn't it?
Well, yes, because all religions, Christianity, the extremist Christianity, it is a movement, it is a fundamentalism across the religions. In Judaism, the younger Jewish community is more radical. This is a movement across the religions, and it's very hard to stop, really. It's the momentum that's there. It's the only growing past religion.
Anthony, in finishing, Boris's chances in 0 to 10 of now becoming Prime Minister?
Well, you never know with Boris, so it's anything. I would say 7.5.
OK, all right, thank you very much indeed. Let's go to Graham and Hay on Wye. Graham, good evening.
Hello, Nigel. Good to talk to you again.
So, did Boris do this having thought it through, and does it increase his chances amongst Tory paid-up party members?
I think yes and yes. The man is no fool, although he sometimes comes across as a bumbling fool. He's a very careful, clever, calculating man. He's done this to stir up a discussion, and I think he also realises that the vast majority of the people in Britain agree with him. Yes, it is insulting, and I know there are calls for him to apologise, and it's offensive, I guess, to the Muslim community. But hey-ho, it's not a crime to be offensive. What about the offence that is caused to the British people and me when I see these ladies or women walking around dressed like that, giving a very clear sign to me that they've got no intention whatsoever of integrating into our society and adopting and embracing our culture and customs.
Yeah, and Graham, 100 years ago, this very year, that women, for the first time, had the vote in this country, and yet I think there are many, Graham, like you, that see this as a retrograde step. Do you think, given, Graham, that not just the party chairman, Brandon Lewis, but now the Prime Minister have demanded an apology, what will Boris do?
Sea trail still, aren't they? They haven't realised the new thing that's happening in the UK. Once again, like you said earlier, I think Boris is taking a leaf out of Trump's book. I think he'll get away with this because people will find it refreshing.
So what do you? So will Boris?
UKIP as well.
Will Boris now double down? Will Boris do a Trump and double down, or will he back off and apologise?
Well, that's a good question because he has backed off before.
Well, I'm asking you that question, Graham. Come on.
I hope he doesn't. I really hope he doesn't. I hope he stands firm.
Okay.
And I think it's greatly increased his chances of becoming the next Prime Minister.
Graham, I agree with you. Thank you. You're listening to the Nigel Farage Show, exclusively on LBC. It is now 16 minutes past 7. Whilst on the one hand, Boris Johnson was saying he didn't think a total burqa ban was the right thing to do in this country, as the Danes are just about to do, he did also say that women walking around wearing the burqa look like letterboxes or bank robbers. It's caused uproar within his own party, including all the way up to Theresa May, who's demanding that he apologises. Thus far, he hasn't done so. In the past, Boris has regularly apologised for things he's said and done. Will he in this case, or does him coming out as critical as he has of the burqa within our society actually make him more likely or less likely to become our next Prime Minister? Folks, I think it makes him more likely. Look, if over half the country consistently in opinion polls want a burqa ban, imagine if you broke that down to Conservative voters. My guess is that would put you up into the mid 60%. It could, I don't know, but my guess is it would. It could be even higher than that. I think this makes him more likely to win the Tory leadership if there's a contest, because most Tory members have had enough of politically correct rubbish. Tell me I'm wrong. Tell me this makes Boris less likely. Tell me this makes Boris wholly unsuitable. You can do so on 0345 6060 973. And on Facebook, Sam says, anyone wearing one while driving is wrong to wear them. They're too restrictive. I'd never thought of that. Steve says, Boris is a total embarrassment to society. Andrea says, Boris couldn't lead a donkey. Gina says, Boris is correct, though. He is leaning toward what the rest of us believe. Gina, I think you're on the money. I really, really do. Leonard says the worst thing he can do is apologise. Otherwise, it will shut down the debate totally. Well, Leonard, I'm watching this, as we all will, over the next 48 hours to see whether he will apologise. He apologised for comments about Liverpool. He's apologised. In fact, he's actually spent most of his career going around apologising for things that he said and done. My guess is Boris doesn't apologise. My guess is Boris doubles down. My guess is Boris goes full Trump. Phil in Hastings says Boris should be leader of UKIP. Thanks for that, Phil. Let's go to Kevin, a new caller to my show from Slough in Berkshire. Good evening, Kevin.
Good evening, Nigel. I've got to say, this is like that bit in Wayne's World where they met Alice Cooper, you know.
Very good. So, is Boris, has he put himself closer to being Prime Minister, Kevin?
Well, the problem is, I was saying to your screener, it's the internal party structure. How does he get that? He's hated in the Tory party, from what I can understand. You know, I follow politics. Michael Portillo, who probably agrees with him on the EU and how to leave the EU, hates the guy and doesn't want him to be leader. There is a gridlock of internal party politics on the Labour side and the Tory side, and it is holding two completely dysfunctional leaders in place at the moment.
Isn't the truth of it, Kevin, that Boris actually is enormously popular amongst the Tory grassroots, but not popular amongst the parliamentary party?
Absolutely. And how, I mean, I don't know. I don't exactly know how their internal, the Tory party internal leadership vote works, but I know he's got to get a certain amount of.
Well, the way that it works, Kevin, is
go forward.
The way that it works is if the Prime Minister is removed or resigns, there is a contest that takes place between Conservative members of Parliament. There are 316 of them, I think, at last count, and they will then pick a short list of two. That short list of two will get put to the paid-up Tory party members in the country who will make that decision. And Kevin, you know, my thesis here is that 2/3 of them will actually support these comments.
Nigel, do you not think that... I agree with you, I agree. I don't think, you know, we need a Trump in this country because we've got the same problems that America has, and we just need someone to tell it like it is, you know, in language that people understand. The problem with the Tory party is that I don't know, you know, what percentage you want to put on it, but a large number of their MPs joined the Tory party over the Lib Dems because they wanted a ministerial career. That is the situation in the Tory party. People like Soubry, I can't remember the guy's name. There's another, I mean, the Chancellor. There are another...
Philip Hammond, his name is. I mean, do you know something, Kevin? You can't name the Chancellor, and yet you're an LBC listener. I promise you, if we put Philip Hammond in a lineup in Newcastle, no one could pick him out. I mean, that is how characterless our politicians have become. Which is why, Kevin, Boris, for all his trip-ups and all his mistakes, he's at least a personality, isn't he?
Absolutely. I mean, I agree. He would win. I mean, this whole project was his to oversee, and it's thanks to Michael Gove that he didn't get a chance. But, you know, I think he would rally the Brexit side of the argument in this country, win over the middle ground, and I think he would win an election. But he's got to get through the Tory party first. Yeah.
Kevin, I'm going to ask you very quickly, make a prediction. Does Boris Johnson do a Trump, double down, back his comments, or does he apologise and walk away tail between the legs?
I think he's testing the water, and I think he'll double down.
OK, very good. Kevin, thank you for your call. Call again, please, at some point in the future. Jay from East London says, women in burqas don't worry me at all. Boris the buffoon does. But I also get Boris for PM. The sooner, the better. Nigel, the wearing of a burqa is cultural. Some Muslim men insist their wives wear it to stop other men lusting after them. Alan, OK. But the point is that actually the spread of wearing the burqa is a comparatively recent and modern thing, and I've spoken to a lot of Muslim scholars. Nowhere in the Quran is this insisted upon. So you know, okay, religions evolve, religions change. There are many that tell me that in fact it's the sort of Salafists from Saudi Arabia who have pushed this agenda. I have to tell you, when I see women walking down the street wearing a burqa, I think to myself, are they liberated women living in modern 21st century Britain? My only conclusion is no. And yet, as UKIP leader, when I talked about this stuff, I was put on endless BBC interviews with burqa-wearing women who were telling me live on air how liberated they felt. I don't believe a word of it, but that's me. What does Ian in Acton think? Ian, good evening.
Good evening. Yeah, I do agree with you. I do think that Boris Johnson was more likely to get elected because of his comments.
Yep.
But I don't think that's a good thing. I think you've been portraying that as a good thing, kind of doubling down, standing by your ignorant comments.
Ian, I haven't actually said that I approve of it. I'm just trying to predict where we go from here. You know, it may be the summer recess, Ian, but Mrs May is extremely vulnerable on a whole number of levels. So, yeah, I'm not eulogising about Boris's comments, because I find him, Ian, to be honest with you, wholly inconsistent. How can you, on the one hand, use the expressions he's used about the burqa, yet on the other, talk about, you know, complete amnesties for illegal immigrants? So, you know, politically, I find Boris pretty inconsistent.
Well, he might be inconsistent, but I would take it to task. It does sound a bit like you eulogising him along with Donald Trump. Donald Trump, firstly, he has been incredibly inconsistent. It's one of his key characteristics. He's constantly been reversing his decisions and his policies. But this is not.
I'm not sure I agree. I'm not sure I agree with that, Ian.
Shouldn't be. The point is, we shouldn't be eulogising or glorifying people's bigoted comments. What we should be doing is singling these people out and acknowledging them for what they are. They're bigoted, they're racist, and they're not fit for this country. So,
Ian, should we defend our Judeo-Christian culture? Should we defend the fact that 100 years ago, for the first time, women got the vote, and after 1929, all women got the vote? Should we defend the great social liberal advances that we've made, or should we be content that within sections of society they maybe are being reversed?
Well, it depends how you look at the world. If you think that women dressing less and less makes you more liberal, then you really have to reevaluate what you want from society.
I wasn't arguing here for Love Island or anything like that, you know, although I rather like Hayley Hughes, who I've met a few times from Love Island. I'm arguing, Ian, that actually... perhaps within sections of the Muslim community in Britain, women in those communities don't enjoy the same rights as others.
But how can you make that assessment without having evidence for that? I don't know what you're basing it on. You see, the thing is,
I've seen firsthand. I've seen firsthand quite a bit of evidence in terms of voting and other things that suggest to me that women within those communities may not be as free as others. Now, look, I could be wrong in my interpretation, but Ian, when you see, living in Acton, when you see women walking down the street wearing the burqa, how do you feel about it?
I feel, thank God, that these actually people still, despite all of the hate, despite all of the bigotry on the mainstream news, in the mainstream press, in society, despite that, they're still holding on to what they believe, which apparently is what you like, but not when it comes to Muslim women. People want women. So
do you believe, Ian?
Let me finish.
Now, Ian, do you believe it's their choice?
I would much rather see someone dressed in a burqa than see someone not even half naked anymore. This summer heatwave has witnessed women practically walking naked. The question is why? Why do women feel they have to dress less than men? That's my question to you, Nigel. If you can answer that question, I'll agree with you about the burqa.
Well, I'm not sure I agree with you, actually, Ian, because my experience of the heat wave, it's the men who are walking around wearing a pair of shorts or trunks and nothing else at all. Look, Ian, what I'm saying to you is, I do not believe... Again, I could be wrong. Challenge me, anybody. I do not believe that these women that are wearing the burqa are doing so of their own free will and choice. I believe they're being forced to do it.
Yes, but you're arguing that from a point of ignorance. Do you understand that point or not?
Well, Ian, I have spent quite a lot of time studying the subject over many long years, and I am absolutely of the belief that the vast majority of women that cover up their faces and their bodies in this way are forced to do so, and I've seen plenty of evidence to suggest it. But hey, Ian, back to the question. You agree with me, it increases Boris's chances, but you see it as a negative retrograde step, yeah?
Well, yeah, I don't think we should enjoy bigotry. And the point about Judeo-Christian values, remember that this wasn't always a Judeo-Christian country, and it's now becoming less of a Judeo-Christian country. It's now becoming more of a Muslim country. More than the vast majority of the people in London are no longer white Judeo.
And is that a good thing, Ian?
Heritage. Sorry?
Is that a good thing?
Do you think it's a bad thing?
I think we must stand up and defend who we are. We are a Judeo-Christian country, and we should be tolerant religiously of all sorts of people.
Britain, Nigel, your ancestors, when they were in Britain, let's say your ancestors were in Britain before Prophet Jesus started his missions, would you have accepted Christianity in Britain?
Well, do you know what? We've been doing it now.
Because both Judaism and Christianity, because you want to defend it.
Ian, I think St. Augustine landed in 603. We were a relatively heathen country, late to religion, but it's been there for 1,500 years. Ian, I could go on forever. I must go. I'm being shouted at because It's now 7:32, and sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me. That's what I was brought up to believe. Boris has said something. He said we shouldn't ban the burqa outright. Denmark's gone over the top, but his personal feeling is that women who walk around wearing the burqa look like letterboxes at best or bank robbers at worst. It's led to a huge furore, and even the Prime Minister now is demanding that he apologises. We're speculating tonight. Will he apologise? And if he doesn't apologise, does it make his chances of becoming Prime Minister greater or lesser? I think greater, because I think amongst Conservative paid-up party members, they're rather going to agree with him. But talking of that, they're just words. What about actions? Well, I am absolutely appalled the way in which vandals attacked the family home of Conservative Member of Parliament Jacob Rees-Mogg. It happened overnight on the 1st of August at his mansion in West Harttree, Somerset. That's where the Rees-Moggs live, but they were away on holiday in the USA. Police say graffiti was sprayed on a building and on a car, and that damage was caused to the garden. According to a report in the Mail Online, the words "posh scum" were written on the windows of the house. This is absolutely disgusting behaviour. And I have been in touch with Boris, and with Jacob, and I have commiserated with him. It's really, really horrible stuff, you know, and I speak as someone who knows something about this kind of behaviour. But equally, that's the left behaving in the most disgusting way. But what about this? UKIP has suspended 3 party members following an incident at a left-wing bookshop. Police were called to bookmarks in Bloomsbury, central London on Saturday after a protest. A statement on the shop's Facebook page said around a dozen mask-wearing fascists, their word, attempted to intimidate staff and customers and to destroy books and other materials. In a statement, UKIP party chairman Tony McIntyre said 3 members have been suspended pending an investigation. There have been no arrests. There were no reports of injuries. But members of UKIP, including one, a member of UKIP's national executive, going into bookstores trying to ban books. There are some very, very horrid historical precedents for that kind of behaviour. And I never thought I'd say this, but going back to the 1930s, and I tell you what, I hope UKIP act and throw these people out of the party. We are all entitled to have an opinion. We are all entitled to protest. We're not entitled to attack people's family homes. We're not entitled to go into a business that happens to be selling publications that we don't approve of. Either we believe in our rights of free speech in a democratic country, or we don't. And you know something? My views on many things are very clearly established and very firm. But any one of you out there can come on and ring 0345 6060 973 and disagree with me. And I promise you, you will get a polite hearing all the while you're polite to me, because I believe that is the essence of proper democratic debate. That is what our forebears fought in 2 world wars so that we should be free to do. Right, back to the subject. Has Boris, by saying that women wearing burqas look like letterboxes, made himself more or less likely to become the next Prime Minister? Keith on Facebook says the burqa should be banned in public places. Boris would be a good Prime Minister. Gary says if it's not offensive for bikers to have to remove their helmets in a petrol station or a store, why does the offence not work both ways? Gary, I get it. Joy says I don't think Boris is going to be PM, as the leftists will have a great big target full of juicy gaffes to exploit. Joy, that's what every Democrat said when Trump managed to get through the series of primaries. You know, the fact that your opponents may rejoice at things you say and get wrong, that's not what matters here. What matters is those that might potentially support you. Let's go to Alice in Cobham. Alice, good evening to you.
Hello, Nigel. I spoke to you before.
I remember. So has Boris got this right or not?
Yes, he has, absolutely.
Has he?
I'm just sick of this country not standing up for what we think is what we want in this country. Because, you know, let's be fair, as a Western woman, if we went to Muslim countries, we'd respect their way of carrying on. I couldn't walk around as a normal Western woman like I do here in their country, and I would be fearful of dressing the way I dress here. And also, I find it really threatening to walk past these women like this. I don't know if they're women or not. So why should they walk around like that? And I agree with you also that most of them, the majority of them, are forced to wear that because.
Well, that's Alice. That's my belief. And yet, as I say, when I was UKIP party leader, a number of people were produced by the BBC saying it was their own free choice. Do you not think, Alice, it's maybe slightly offensive to say they look like letterboxes?
No, because like you said, sticks and stones, we are afraid now to say anything without upsetting other
or
people in our
causing
country.
Offence, Alice, that's what it's called.
Causing offence, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It's crazy. We can't say anything. It's so PC with everything. And I just feel that I want more people who are born in this country to stand up for our rights,
well, Alice,
what we want.
Alice, hang on.
Yeah.
It may well be that there are many women wearing the burqa who were born in this country, and that the caller I had before the break, who said, London particularly is no longer a Christian city because of the number of Muslim population. Maybe, Alice, a fundamental change has taken place.
Well, I'm sorry, that really upsets me because that's what I'm saying. People are afraid to actually say we are a Christian country first and foremost.
Yep.
We do accept other people's religions, and we accept a lot of people. Unlike other countries, we couldn't go there and build a church, for instance, in the middle of anywhere. But they can come here and build mosques everywhere. They seem to think that they can take over this country completely. And I, for one, will stand up for this country. I'm sick of it. I really am sick of it.
Are we heading, Alice, for a very big cultural clash on this?
Yeah, I think we possibly are.
And Boris, and maybe Boris has seen that. So, Alice, you think Boris now could become PM, yeah?
I hope he does. Yeah, he does make a lot of, hiccups here and there.
Well, you could say that,
yeah, obviously. Yeah, but let's face it, Nigel, most of them do. We haven't got a lot of choice. I would like you as Prime Minister, to be fair.
Well, that's very sweet of you, Alice, but that's not going to happen in a hurry. Listen, Alice, thank you. Going to move on. Stephen on Twitter says, Boris is finished. He should retire ASAP. The longer we allow people not to integrate in this country, the worse our problems will be, says Steve from Sutton. Let's ask James, a new caller from Barnet, how he feels about this. James, good evening.
Hi there, Nigel. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. So, when Boris made these comments, I mean, was he being sincere, or was it a naked bid for the Tory leadership?
Well, I think it's a bit of both, and really I had 2 points that I wanted to make with you, Nigel.
Sure.
I think the first one is that Boris has a connection with both the Tory base and, I suppose, the electorate as a whole that I think most politicians don't. I mean, I think you do yourself, and I think maybe someone like Jacob Rees-Mogg does, but I think most politicians are struggling to really get a connection with the electorate. And I think in making these comments, Boris is, I suppose, trying to engineer maybe publicity or, I don't know, outrage is perhaps the wrong term, but some kind of a reaction because I think for him finding support within the parliamentary Conservative Party is going to prove difficult.
Yes.
But I think it's a little bit, I'm not sure it's quite Trumpian is the word, but it's a little bit like a Trump tweet edited by an old Etonian, if you will.
Very good. Okay, and your second point, James.
But I think the second point, I think the important thing that's been lost here, perhaps in maybe it is a bit of a Trumpish way to phrase it, is that Boris very clearly said he wouldn't be in favour of banning the niqab. He also correctly says that there is nothing in the Quran that imposes the wearing of the niqab. And I think it's important to say that he's against banning things, which I think is right. I think part of Western and British values are that we don't impose our way of life upon anyone. But equally, I don't feel that the niqab necessarily has a place in modern Britain. And I think in saying that, and in saying that the niqab is really a divisive form of dress. But that I wouldn't ban it. I just think it's. I just disagree with it.
Do you know what, James? That's pretty much my position. That's pretty much my position. I wouldn't force people, and say what they can and can't wear walking down Bromley High Street, but I do think in banks and on the London Underground we should all adhere to the same standards. I'm actually very much with Boris on this. I might not have used the same colourful language. James, lastly, is Boris, after what he said, and if he doesn't back down, is he closer to becoming Prime Minister?
Well, I don't think he should back down, and I think again there's a lot of conjecture about whether he has or hasn't met with Steve Bannon and some of the
this is just ridiculous nonsense. I mean, all right, he speaks a bit to Steve Bannon. The idea this is some Bannon put-up job, James, believe me, is for the birds.
No, I'm not suggesting it's a put-up job or even, in fact, something negative. But I think if we've learned one thing from the Donald Trump campaign, it's that it's important to double down. You fair enough, you make these tweets, and some of them, I think, as always with Trump, there's an undercurrent of truth and reasonableness into what he's saying, and perhaps it's put in an explosive, headline-grabbing way. But the important thing is don't double down, and I think Boris is going to take that tactic. Whether it puts him any closer to becoming...
We'll have to see. James,
PM, I'm not sure.
I thank you for your call. You're listening to the Nigel Farage Show, exclusively on LBC. It's now 7:47. Mrs May is not pleased. Not only did Boris Johnson resign as Foreign Secretary in the wake of Chequers, but following his article in the Daily Telegraph in which he said women who wear the burqa look like letterboxes at best and bank robbers at worst, she has now responded publicly.
It's imperative that everybody is careful in the language that they use. It's very clear that the language that Boris Johnson used to describe people's appearance has caused offence. It's not language I would have used.
I'm sure.
I think it was wrong to have used that language, and I agree with Brandon Lewis.
Should action be taken against them?
As I say, I agree with Brandon Lewis. I think Boris Johnson used language in describing people's appearance that's obviously caused offence. It was the wrong language to use. He should not have used it.
There we go. There's our leader. There's our Prime Minister, as ever, saying we ought to be careful and cautious. And the one thing you can say about Theresa May is she's always careful and cautious, as Mr Barnier knows very well indeed. So what is Boris going to do? It's gone all the way up to the Prime Minister. They are all demanding an apology. Is he going to apologise, or is he going to double down? In the past, Boris has very often thought to himself, gosh, this trouble I've caused, I'm going to have to apologise for it. He's apologised regularly for things. My guess is that in this case, he won't. I think Boris, and you can think many things about Boris, he is not stupid. He sat down at home and wrote this article on a Sunday afternoon for the Daily Telegraph. He knew what he was saying. He would have been able to predict what the response was, and he knows that probably about 2/3 of Tory party members will agree with those comments. Sandra on Facebook says, I don't rate Boris as PM, but he's right on burqas. Peter in Lancashire says, they're going on about being offended by Boris, but I find it offensive when I see a woman wearing a burqa. Well, Peter, do you know something? A lot of people feel very uncomfortable indeed when they see people wearing a burqa walking down the street. And if that makes some of you mad to listen to it, I'm sorry, but it is simply true. Alan is calling from Aberdeen. Alan, good evening.
Hi, Nigel. Thanks for taking the call.
Not one bit. So, is Boris... I mean, it doesn't look very pretty, I know, but is he in the right direction?
I think he is, but I don't think he'll be PM. To be honest, I'd sooner Rees Moggs myself.
But Alan, are you a Tory party member?
I'm not an actual member, but I am a Tory supporter, yeah.
Okay, so, but you haven't got a vote, but people like you do have a vote. Do you think amongst people like you, this makes him more likely to become PM or less likely?
I don't think it'll swing either way, because you have to look at everything with Boris. He's a bumbling idiot at the best of times.
No, come on. Isn't this all a bit of an act with Boris?
Yes, it is. However, you've got to bear in mind with Boris, I agree that there should be the burqa should be banned in the UK, and to be honest, all my Muslim friends actually say a lot worse about that thing than Boris or me or you. Let's just put it that way. I think he is clever, but bear in mind, it wasn't so long ago he was basically in Tehran grovelling to the Iranians going against President Trump and his stance.
Alan, that is a whole massive debate coming over the next weeks and months. If Trump is going to ban, does not want America to do business with anyone dealing with Iran, that's a whole separate debate. But Alan, Boris the buffoon, did he today become a bit closer to becoming the PM?
No.
OK, all right, thank you. Got to move on. Arif is calling from Chelsea. Good evening.
Good evening. How are you, Nigel?
I am very well indeed, thank you. So, has Boris offended the Muslim community in saying this?
Well, I mean, obviously, there are parts of it. I'm sure the MCB and MEND and all those, Muslim groups will be on his back immediately after, I think, MEND already... MCB issued a statement.
The Muslim Council of Britain, yeah.
Yeah, so, but one thing I'd like to disagree with, I'm Muslim myself, and I was ex-chairman of St. Stephen's School, which you know very well about.
Yep.
It's not that women are being forced at a sort of adult age to take this. I think most of them are probably, being programmed from a very young age.
Yeah, I've seen pictures of the East End of London of girls aged sort of 5 going to primary school wearing burqas.
Numerous times. Yeah. So St. Stephen's School is the one, is the school, we're number one ranked school in the country.
Yeah.
And we had girls at 4, 5, 6 coming to our school wearing, which is actually dangerous because we banned it for underage. Because, we went to the sort of lengths of taking the cords off the blinds so they don't get caught up in it.
So Arif, you banned it because you thought that the girls should reach an age when they can make their own decisions?
Well, no, I mean, that was my sort of personal thing. But actually, if that was the case, we'd have banned it all the way through to 11. We'd only did it till key stage 1, which is 8 years of age.
Yeah.
Because keeping the community sensitivities sort of in mind, because it's actually frankly dangerous because the classroom teachers couldn't actually run around, in the playground chasing them when they've got this dangling clock around.
And did you meet very were there very angry parents when you asked?
Absolutely. I mean, MEND and MCB, so got the whole nation against us, and so I ended up resigning as a result.
Wow. So, in a sense, does Boris have a point?
Absolutely. In a Western democracy, it's you need to be able to look at people when you talk to them and stuff, right?
Well, I agree with that completely. I mean, how on earth can you teach a class of kids? I mean, I agree with all of that. And yet, I'm being told by some people, Arif, that this is, a religious freedom of expression and that we should respect it.
No, I mean, when did this turn up? This only happened in this generation.
It's a recent thing.
You're exactly the same age as I am. You're 2 months younger than me.
Yeah.
In our generation, so what? I was born in the Middle East and sort of grew up there, and it was very different. There were a few people. I mean, I was in Dubai just, a couple of months back, and there were no girls at 10, 12, 8 wearing a hijab. There was only people about 14, 15.
And am I right, Arif, in saying that it was the Salafists backed by Saudi Arabia that really pushed this agenda?
The Wahhabi Salafist spread of Islam across the globe.
Yeah.
So it stretches right across.
So has Boris put himself nearer to becoming Prime Minister, Arif?
You get him on the short list, he'll win.
OK, very good. Very good, thank you. And my last caller tonight on this subject is Rob, a new caller from Greenwich. Good evening.
Good evening, Nigel. How are you keeping?
I'm keeping well. I'm watching Boris with great fascination. I think he's improved his chances. Others disagree.
Well, he may have improved his chances, but it depends on the audience he's trying to aim this at. You yourself, Nigel, you said that you believe the women wearing the niqab and wearing burqas have been impressed into wearing them.
Yes.
There's a good potential they have been, as you said yourself. Well, this kind of language, this is just going to green light further abuse in the street. This is going to double the oppression, surely. If you think
well, maybe the women wearing burqas have been... maybe they've been oppressed.
Well, perhaps they have, but do you not think that a former head of state using this, or a former very senior member of the cabinet using this kind of language is going to encourage more oppression from people just shouting, you're wearing a letterbox, you look like a letterbox, you look like a bank robber. How are they going to feel? That's double the oppression.
Well, maybe, Rob, they feel very depressed and down that they're being forced to do this in the first place.
Well, we're going to increase it by doing this. We're going to increase...
So what do we do? Rob? Do we just run away from the issue and pretend it's not happening?
Talk sensibly about it, Nigel.
OK. So do you think the words Boris used were wrong?
They're absolutely wrong. He knows they're wrong. He chooses childish language to speak to people like that. That's his choice of language.
But he did it. He did it, Rob.
Much better language to use.
He did it, Rob, did he not, for political reasons?
You bank robber. You bank robber.
Yeah. Yeah.
How's that going to sound going across the street? You letterbox.
Yeah.
He's green-lighting it. He should know better. He should set a much better example.
Rob, I've got to go. I thank you. Rob says Boris should know better. I contend Boris knew exactly what he was doing. You're listening to The Nigel Farage Show. I'll be back tomorrow night at 7. At 10 this evening, it's Ian Collins.